evening, cult members of Welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And welcome to our reaction, breakdown, review, discussion, bitching about David of The Last of Us episode 8. This one is called We Are All in Need, I believe. When we are in need. I read it like 3 times before we started, and I still didn't remember what it was called. We've talked about this in the other episodes. I've played the game. She has not, so she's coming from the show. I knew who David was. He could die in a grease fire.
Yes.
Kinda. And spoilers, by the way. So, thoughts on this episode? I've been dreading this episode. I'll just start with that.
And I get it. I get why you and our daughter were both like about this episode. Yeah, all the emotions. He was icky, and Ellie was kicked ass when she needed to.
Right.
They talked about it in the after show that they weren't gonna make her the kind of damsel in distress that Joel has to come save.
Right.
Which I really appreciate. We've talked about that with other shows and movies and stuff where they don't kind of lean on that trope, and they let people in general who typically would have been shown to have to have been saved or whatever, women typically, but just getting a chance to save themselves. And she did. She completely saved herself. But now Joel's got to be there for the emotional support.
It's very interesting. They talked about in the after show something that was not in the game, but is known to us game players, is that Ellie has violence in her heart. And they've been kind of setting that up since the first episode when Joel kills the military guy, and she kind of enjoys the process of watching him.
Has a bit of a smirk.
It has a smirk, and this is going to sound really weird, but is kind of getting off on the prospect of watching somebody do violence.
Yeah.
And as they've been on this journey across the country, her real being out in the real world, and her understanding people are not great. There are some good people out there, Tommy and everything that's going on in Jackson. There's good going on there. But to survive in this world, you need to have some violence. But there's another level of violence that Joel has, that Ellie has, that David has, that is finally said out loud to Ellie in this episode.
Yeah.
And Joel being the one to kind of help not save her by saving her, but like you're saying, the emotional saving of her is really like that's the crux of the whole game, is Joel finally allowing himself to be emotionally accepting of someone else, and happens to be in someone who is just like him,
right?
Just a girl and like 100 pounds lighter,
right?
Which is I'm glad that they played into that in this episode too, because you forget that Ellie is 14 or 15 in the game at this point in time, and she's a 14, 15-year-old girl, maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, and so she does get manhandled at times, but she's also very resourceful within the game. A lot of sneaking around, what they did in the diner,
right,
in the steakhouse.
Yeah.
When David
steakhouse,
yeah. We'll get into that in a minute. But her ultimately using her size and her stealth to get to David is something that you do in the game as well. And it's when you kind of start to understand that when you're playing as Ellie, you can't play the same way as you played as Joel.
Right. You can't just brute force your way through things. You've got to be a little more
a little more stealthy,
strategic.
Strategic. And it was very nice that they showed that.
Yep.
Let's talk about David before we get into kind of the other stuff of this. David was played by Scott Shepherd. You ever watched a movie and thought, like, this is just visually amazing, and I just love the way it looks, and the colors are amazing? Well, our friends over at Movie Palette have come up with these great pieces of art that you could put up on your wall to show your love of movies without really necessarily being overly dramatic about it. Think of a movie barcode kind of thing, where you can look at the colors and know what the movie is, but it's very, very subtle. If you know us, we are into Tron Legacy. The music and the lights and the color itself is just amazing. Just to give you an idea of what they have, go to moviepalette.com, find your own personal favorite movie, your movie color palette, and have it hang on your wall. At checkout, put in Pop Culture 15 to get 15% off. Thank you, Movie Palette, for sponsoring this video. Link is in the description down below. And don't forget, use Pop Culture 15 at checkout to get 15% off your order. And did a great job. Like, he is the appropriate level of creepy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's an amazing real person.
Yeah.
In the game itself, it's always implied that he has got a violent past, or he has pedophile
Yeah.
kind of feel to him or
Yeah.
whatever. So when they kind of introduce that process here, he's much more of a cult leader,
Right.
and
And
he
they address a lot of it's interesting you're sitting there talking about it because like in The Stand, they talk about the people that are in jail and one of the people that ends up being um, Flag's right hand man was basically starving in jail in prison
right,
because everybody had left, right? So you almost get the feeling that this guy, that David, was possibly, you know, if not in jail, he was out there being a pedophile or in
rapist or whatever it was.
right
Yeah,
in
yeah,
in real life. He said he had a violent past, and now the world has changed, and he says he found God, but really, I think it was just a way to bring people to him so that he could, I don't know, keep doing what he wanted to do. Or, I mean, those kind of people are just, they have like the psychopathic,
yeah, yeah. That's what I was gonna
mind
say. Yeah.
anyway. So they're always trying to rig the game to whatever it is they, what they want or need or whatever. So,
It's in the again in the game, it's not really explicitly said that he is the leader of the town, but he's the one who's calling all the shots and doing all the things and
yeah.
everything.
Well, and he's the father
Uh,
or whatever.
right, right. But I like that they use um the concept of people needing something else beyond them to explain what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And that's well a lot of what religion is trying to explain why I'm in the situation that I am, and that unfortunately gets um, exploited by those who wish to gain power and keep power or control people or however you want to look at it. And when you have somebody like David, who is admittedly a violent person, who is obviously a pedophile or a rapist or something along that line, they don't
Right.
specifically say it.
Right.
When you have somebody like that, he knows all the right trigger things
Right. Yep.
to get people to follow him and follow him blindly
Yeah.
enough.
Because you had to lure those people in to get what you wanted before all this happened,
Right,
right? It's
right,
just a little bit of a different um, um end goal,
yeah.
right? And if he, can get all these people to follow him, he's got, if he's, a pedophile, he's got these people to make babies, and I have my own little farm,
I
so to speak.
I like that he kind of um, inserted himself into the family of the wife
Okay.
and the daughter
Yeah.
who Joel killed in the previous episode.
Right.
Um, and the idea of inserting himself as the father figure in that relationship to get what he wants from either the wife and or the daughter.
Right.
It's not specifically laid out in front of everybody where this is exactly what he's trying to do.
Right.
But we as an audience, we know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we've seen enough where we know enough to go, oh yeah, this is bad.
Right. And that's kind of what I was saying. He has laid the groundwork with this group of people to be able to do that effortlessly. And they're going to kind of blindly go along with it, or at least to a certain extent. I mean, the problem is when you have kids in there, a lot of times, teenage rebellion, not a lot of times, but sometimes they figure out they don't,
Right.
like you kind of got the look from the little girl after he hit her,
Right.
like, yeah, no, this isn't gonna fly with
Right.
me.
Right.
But we didn't, I mean, it's only what 9 episodes, and
Right.
we
Right.
didn't
Right.
go there. But
Right. Also, the banner when he's giving him his sermon at the beginning of the episode, and the banner in the back says something, but underneath it says "He will provide," and it's like God will believe in God, and He will provide for you. And the person who's doing the providing and giving the sermons is David, and
mhm.
so he's just planted himself in this little community has come to rely on him no matter what. And out of that, they're starting to run out of food. It's been a really bad winter. Again, in the game, it's constant blizzard during this whole part of the winter part of the game. And within the show, David asked James after his Sunday morning service or whatever, how much food do we have left, and James said, a week, maybe two if we stretch. And then as we go along, we start to realize that the meat that they're getting
Yeah.
is those of their dead.
Yeah.
Um, al-
As soon as he brought that tub of meat in,
Yeah.
and she asked what it was, and he said venison. I mean, as soon as he slapped that down, I was like, oh no, that's people.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Soylent Green.
again, not something that's explicitly talked about in in the game. There is when Ellie's in the cage, she just come across an ear. She does say, "You're going to cut me up in little pieces." But most of that scene when she's in the cage is David trying to talk her into being his wife, his right hand person, his
Right.
significant other,
Right.
his counter self.
Right.
And
Except that's not how it's going to go.
right,
I mean, he's saying that to her because he thinks that's what she needs to hear to trust him,
right.
because she is strong. He can tell that she's a strong person, so he's got to play on that to get her to come over. Then
Super amazing deep level manipulations.
yes, total yes. Gaslighting on display.
And gaslighting
And then
on
as soon
display.
as it happens,
Yeah.
she's not going to be his right hand man. That's
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah, because she is. He even tells her, "You're smart. You're a good leader," and that's everything that they said in the last episode and the Left Behind episode. When was it Wong, who is the head of Fedra education or whatever,
Yeah.
was telling her the same thing. Like, it's true, and it means something when it's coming from Wong, who's actually trying to be a good person and trying to teach her how to survive. And it's very different when it's coming from David, who's trying to use that as a manipulation.
Right.
And I'm glad that they spent last week doing that, explaining that whole process with her. To now point, there's a lot of other stuff going on there with why they did last week, and this week. But setting all that up and having that conversation, and then the very next week having David using the same exact words
Yeah.
to try to gaslight her into being by his side is just it's really 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 good.
Mhm.
So, David's right hand man is James. James is played by Troy Baker. Troy Baker is the mocap performer for Joel in the game. It's amazing that that Troy is in the game, not as Joel. I understand all of the reasoning of everything why they picked who they picked. Pedro's killing it. I'd like to have seen Troy do the job, but Troy is directly involved with the show by running the podcast and being in an episode. The lady that plays Ellie in the game, I cannot freaking remember her name right now, is playing Ellie's mom. I'm assuming in next week as a flashback scene.
Yeah. I
Um,
remember hearing that.
So it's so like I'm really glad that he's in this. Now all of us for the last week have been going, oh my god, Joel's gonna kill Joel, and no, it was Ellie who killed
Ellie,
Joel. Now us as the
the
game players,
savage cleaver in the throat.
right, which is so. It shows Ellie just being so resourceful and smart to understand what's around her,
Yeah,
and that it was Troy Baker as James that she killed is, for those who didn't watch the show or didn't play the game, is watching this show. Oh, it's a really cool. Ellie's doing a great job. Us, it's like super meta. Like, like I don't believe we're doing this. Um, they did talk about in the after show that they didn't want Joel to be the one to come in to be the White Knight coming in and saving, and that's because he got stabbed and then pulled it out. We've had that conversation. Um, and Ellie sewed him back up, and then they got penicillin when she killed the deer, and David and James came across her. Um, uh, that helped him get better and stuff.
yeah,
But when Joel finally gets there, and I love the slow villain. It's not really a villain thing, but the slow villain approach to him getting there. It's like he's not gonna get there in time. He's not gonna get there in time.
yeah,
He's not gonna get there in time.
yeah.
And I know that he wasn't gonna get there in time, but I don't know how you felt if they laid it out enough to sit there and say he is gonna be there in time to save Ellie.
I don't know that I was really thinking that.
That's fair.
I was just I was just happy or impressed that that it wasn't happening
Right.
more than when's he gonna get there,
Right.
right? I
Right.
was
Right.
just it
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
made me happy that he wasn't there, that she was getting to do it
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah. I. That's a big part of the emotional part of the game.
Yeah.
Is that you understand from this point on that Ellie is a different person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would be.
Yeah, you would be. You totally would be. But having that realization that she has that in her, killing David, which was justified in the game and justified in the show, like it's justified. But the idea that she is now a different person and it's Joel there, the emotionally disconnected person, is the one to be there, and he grabs her after she gets out of the steakhouse and like wraps her in his arms, and she like freaks out, and then kind of he gets her attention, and she just comes to a realization that Joel there to save, like, not to save her, but he's there.
Yeah.
She gives him a big hug, and then Joel calls her baby girl.
Yeah.
He hasn't said baby girl since Sarah died. Right. The zombie show making us cry again.
Yep.
I need my emotional support cocktails. But but that connection point has been something that we've been getting over the last. It's been slowly getting there over eight episodes. It's Joel finally. We kind of got Ellie's connection to Joel in the last episode and why she stayed by giving us everything that happens with Riley and her starting this episode by checking on the wound and then like wrapping herself up with him to try to keep him warm when they sleep. Like it
Yeah.
was so it
She went out hunting and
Yeah,
and then got the medicine and she's shooting it into the wound site. She's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
gonna shoot it in there.
It worked. It works.
worked.
I don't know if that's how penicillin works, but whatever, it works. I'm there.
I wouldn't know either.
I
It's
wouldn't
like,
either.
I don't know what to do with that.
But him calling her baby girl is really like that's been 8 episodes of build up,
Yeah.
and they are now father and daughter.
Yeah.
They finally are there,
No, they need is Grogu.
and now all they need is Grogu on a horse, named Bill. Not Shimmer. Not to Shimmer yet. So a couple things there's some shot for shots stuff that happens with Ellie in the cage, and Ellie and David in the whole compound while they wait for James to come back with some things that are different in that little them waiting for James to come back with the medicine. Clinkers show up.
Oh, okay.
And runners. There's runners and a couple of clinkers that show up, and so you have to work with David as you go along and try to eliminate everybody, and then James shows up with members of the crew, and then she tries to escape, and then
Right.
that's how she gets captured.
Right.
Um, I'm glad that they didn't do that, because you've spent enough time with them having the conversation around the campfire of building up at least a little bit of trust with us as the audience, with David and with Ellie and David, and so not having to go through another action set piece with clinkers and runners, it just doesn't make any sense there.
Yeah.
The emotional connection has been made.
Right.
I'm not going to need to waste 15 minutes or 10 minutes of an episode for them to work together to have her run off,
Yeah.
and having them show up as like a raiding party into town looking for Joel to get revenge on the death of one of their own.
Yeah.
Like I just like that they made that change.
It also gives you a little bit of Ellie's resourcefulness, right? Because she hears something, she comes up, she's kind of upstairs, she's like looking around, and then she sees the birds take off, so she knows that something's going on, and
Right,
so she
right.
runs back down and tries to wake Joel up and give him the knife, and so that's kind of your first. I mean, you get it a little bit with her going out and hunting and stuff, but this is really um her being like thinking on her feet.
Thinking on her own and proving that she can
Yeah.
be on her own without Joel. It's important though that we understand that Joel at this point in time, outside of being hurt, needs Ellie as much as Ellie needs
Yeah.
Joel.
Yeah.
Outside of the surviving part, they need each other
Yeah.
just emotionally and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that a lot like it hasn't really been talked about in the show, but from when Joel and Ellie live Tommy to this point, it's like 4, 5, 6 months. We're at full in winter here at this point in time, and we were early fall
Right.
when we leave Tommy.
Right.
And so that idea of they've had that time on the road for Ellie to learn how to hunt, how to do all these
Yeah.
things. I'm glad they didn't show it in the show because we don't need a training montage of them as they go across and
Yeah.
you know
I think I mean, I knowing that next week is the last episode for this season, um I feel like I could have used a couple more episodes of them just traveling and dealing with the the monsters, right? This is like the zombie show that's doesn't have a ton of zombies in it,
that's
right?
fair.
And I mean, it it might give, not that the emotional stuff hasn't been there, but it might give it more. If you get to spend a little more time with them, get to kind of deal with a little more of the just the dangers of the journey,
Yeah, yeah.
it does feel rushed, and I'm interested because I'm assuming the game ends with her getting to wherever it is she needs to go.
Yes.
So we only have one more episode,
Yes.
and if they're going to end the next episode with them getting there, um, yeah, I'm really gonna feel like it was rushed.
They showed in the trailer. It's like a quick little 20-second trailer. They show them on the I-15 walking into Salt Lake, and that's where they're ultimately going. That's where the Firefly facility
Right,
is and stuff like that.
right.
So they're going to start the episode with them on walking into Salt Lake and getting to the facility, and so and then there's a lot more. I understand what you're saying. Like it does
Well,
seem
yeah, but
rushed,
I
but
mean, whether there is or not, the next episode's the last episode for the season.
yeah, I think if they had to do it over again in the grand scheme of things, I think they would actually have done how they actually did it with episode 1 and 2 as one episode,
Hmm.
and then they would have done an episode somewhere around or made this particular episode 2 episodes, where the end of the episode is when Ellie gets captured,
Yeah, it
and then the
almost
next
feels
episode is everything else that happens beyond
it
that.
almost feels like maybe HBO was just like, we don't we don't want to gamble a ton of money, and so we're
It's $100 million show.
yeah. and it feels a little bit like it could have been their next Game of Thrones, but
Yeah.
they have almost um, cut themselves off because
So yes, it could have been the next Game of Thrones. It could have been their next big
the next
IP
Walking Dead.
in Walking Dead. It could have been that.
Yeah,
But the game only exists in 1 and 2.
right.
And Dunkerman has said he wants to tell one more story within the game around Ellie and what is going on. But ultimately, this universe could be told all over the place. How does Japan handle with this? How does
Yeah,
South America handle this? How
but I
does
don't know how that would
I right,
capture the gamer. The people who have played the game are
right,
going to be like, I mean, like uh, A Quiet Place can do that
right.
because people don't have an emotional attachment to something else besides
And
the
that's
movie.
and that's kind of I think what the part of the problem was with the second story is that people were so connected to what happened in the first one that they in the second one they made decisions that are right for the story that aren't fan friendly.
Yeah,
And when they did that, a lot of people rebelled. The reason I didn't like the game is because I didn't like the gameplay. The story is amazing. And so I think if they took this season and actually made it a full 10 episodes instead of coming back and saying it's going to be 10, oh wait, 9, and then I think next season they'll learn from that and we could do some flashbacks to Ellie and Joel's time on the road, learning how to do things or how they had dealt with clinkers. Or I love the reference to Pittsburgh falling in this because that's what happens in the game. So
yeah,
like there's I understand what you're saying, but I think what they've done so far has been just about pitch perfect. And I think anytime that you have extended or multiple episodes with the runners, the clinkers, the bloaters, all of that kind of stuff, it pulls away a little bit from the emotional story arcs that they're telling. And it's just I guess it's just a mileage may vary between what I was expecting and what you were expecting. And I don't think either one is wrong. I'm not going to sit here and complain and say if this up was 12 or 15 episodes that I wouldn't be watching every week. Like,
right. I
uh,
mean, I'm complaining in a good way.
yeah,
I want more.
and what more? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I do feel like for as not having played the game, I have I feel like I have probably less of a commotion of an emotional commitment and feeling towards Ellie and Joel than you do, than
Okay.
like you
Yeah, yeah.
and Aaron do. And it's just I feel like that would have been better served with a couple more episodes of just being living with them.
Living with the two of them.
It's
Yeah,
super fast paced. We're just from one thing
yeah,
to the next,
yeah.
and we're not getting any.
Yeah, there's a lot of gameplay that is Joel and Ellie playing, talking,
Yeah,
while Joel is pushing a pallet around because Ellie can't swim, and
yeah,
there's
yeah,
like yeah, there's like that stuff that like that that's missing, and I get why they didn't do it, but I understand from your point of view like where like that spending that extra time would have actually been worth it and
yep.
stuff. So. That is our thoughts on episode 8 of The Last of Us, called We Don't Remember the Name. When we are in need. I will try that again. When we are in need, because big words are hard. Let us know what you thought of our breakdown and discussion of it in the comments down below. Please be nice. It's a requirement around here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, and follow us on all social media stuff: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night now.